Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hallie Roderick, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. Thanks for being here. And before we get started today, I wanted to let you know about two upcoming events that I genuinely believe could be incredibly supportive if you're navigating betrayal right now. The first is the Betrayal Healing Conference happening January 26th through the 30th. This is a virtual conference, which means you can attend from anywhere at your own pace and hear many of the top voices in the betrayal trauma space. It's an opportunity to learn, feel validated, and remember that you're not alone in this journey. You'll find the link in my show notes, and I want to be transparent that it is an affiliate link, which simply means that if you choose to register through this link, you'll also be supporting the work I do here on the podcast at no additional cost to you. The second event, I want to share something really special. The first ever in-person AppSats conference happening February 4th through the 6th in Dallas, Texas. There are 2 full days specifically designed for betrayed partners, where you'll get to connect face-to-face with many of the leading professionals in betrayal trauma recovery. I'll be there as well, and I would truly love to meet you in person. If either of these events feels like the next right step for you, check the links in the show notes. You deserve support that truly understands what you've been through. Now, let's jump into today's episode. If you've ever set a boundary and then immediately questioned yourself, was that too harsh? Was that a threat? Am I being controlling? Then this episode is for you. Welcome back to the Rooted and Rising Healing podcast. And today we're talking about something that can get incredibly distorted after betrayal, and that's boundaries. So many women come to me saying, I don't want to threaten him. I don't want to issue ultimatums. I don't want to control his recovery. And I need him to do this. And I need him to do that. And what's actually happening when this happens is we're trying to protect ourselves, often for the first time. Because we all know now that betrayal erodes self-trust and safety. And so boundaries can easily get tangled up with fear. And that's when they start to sound like threats. So today we're going to clearly define what a boundary is, what a threat is, why the difference matters, and how to set boundaries that are rooted in self-respect and not fear and panic. And we've talked a lot about boundaries in some of my early episodes where I talked about your Bill of Rights and your values and the things that are important to you. So this builds on that. But I want to talk about why sometimes confusion exists when it comes to boundaries after betrayal. Because after betrayal, you no longer trust your partner. You may even have a hard time trusting yourself. And your nervous system is typically on high alert. So boundaries aren't always being set from a place of calm and certainty. They're often being set from a place of fear of being hurt again, which makes sense, right? Of course, we don't want to get hurt again. And that doesn't make you wrong. It makes you human. Really learning how to do boundaries from a healthy place that comes from empowerment rather than control is critical in your healing. So clarity matters because boundaries are designed to protect you, and threats try to control somebody else. And we know we don't have any control over anybody else. And so a boundary is about you. It's based on your values, your rights, your limits, something you are responsible for enforcing, not the other person, not anyone around you. Not your spouse or your coworker or your boss or anybody, but something that you are responsible for. And so it's basically kind of like a statement of what you will or will not participate in. So a boundary sounds like, if this continues, I will remove myself. Or I'm not willing to stay in a conversation that becomes abusive. Or I need transparency to remain in this relationship. So boundaries are calm, clear, consistent, and they're followed through. Let me just repeat those examples again. If this continues, I will remove myself. That's not control. That's not telling the other person they have to stop. It's just saying you can continue if you want, but I'm not going to stay here. That could be in reference to manipulation, to gaslighting, to blame shifting, to Darvo, to any of those things. Well, my second example was I'm not willing to stay in conversations that become abusive. That's really important for me to believe so that if and when I find myself in an abusive conversation, my first thought goes to, this conversation is feeling really abusive. I need to disengage. So I will do what I need to do to remove myself from this situation and get myself to safety. Again, not about you can't talk to me like that. You can't do that. You can't this, or you need to stop. It's about, oh, this is happening. I need to get to safety. My third example I gave was I need transparency to remain in this relationship. Man, I need to know that for myself. I need to know that if I see behavior that is less than transparent, that is misleading, that is misrepresenting the truth, that is minimizing or leaving things out, that's not transparent. And I'm not willing to stay in a relationship where that is happening. So that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to go file for divorce tomorrow. That means I might need to withdraw emotionally or physically for a while until I can figure out if that behavior is going to change. But I'm not going to stay as engaged in this relationship in its present form. So again, boundaries come from a place of calm, from clarity, consistency, and I follow through with them. So a boundary does not require the other person to agree with it. It doesn't require them to not have any sort of an emotional reaction. And it doesn't require a debate. Your boundaries don't have to be up for debate. They shouldn't be up for debate. Boundaries are for you. Okay? So if you feel like you have to defend your boundaries or convince somebody else that it's okay for you to have a boundary, then that's a good indicator for you to take a step back and go, okay, I'm putting too much power in the other person's hands with this boundary. What do I need to do to step back and take the consequence of that boundary into my own hands, the actionable step of that boundary into my own hands? So let's talk for a little bit about what a threat is. A threat is about controlling behavior. A threat is rooted in fear or panic or desperation. Sometimes we might be tempted to use force to cause change. And often things escalate when the other person doesn't comply with this. So a threat could sound like, if you don't do this, I'll leave. And then saying it over and over again without actually taking any action on it. Or if you ever make me feel like this again, I'm going to divorce you. But then you don't actually do anything with it. Or you have to change, or else I can't do this. Or else what? Or else what? If they don't change, then what? But then we never follow through with anything. So threats create power struggles. If you ever feel like you're in a parent-child role or a teacher-student dynamic, that might be an indicator that your boundaries aren't quite in the healthy state yet. Threats also undermine self-trust. It's like saying, I need that person to do a specific thing in order for me to be okay. A threat undermines that self-trust. And it erodes safety on both sides. And quite honestly, they backfire most of the time. So the key differences is that boundaries are about what you will do, and threats are about what they must do. So a boundary without follow through ultimately becomes a threat over time. Not because you're manipulative, but because your nervous system honestly is seeking for safety. So if you say, I can't stay if this continues, but you stay anyway, your body and your nervous system learns that my limits don't actually matter and that I don't trust myself. And maybe I need to yell a little louder next time. And that keeps you stuck in unhealthy cycles, really painful cycles. So follow through builds self-respect, self-trust, safety, because you're creating your own safety. If the other person's unwilling or unable to, it creates regulation because your nervous system learns that it can trust you. And you earn credibility with yourself. So even small follow-throughs matter. So if this feels big or scary or intimidating to you, just start small. What's one small step in the direction of a healthy boundary that you can take? So before setting a boundary, ask yourself, am I grounded or am I activated? If I'm activated, it might come across as a threat. If I'm grounded, I can move into a place of empowerment with this boundary. So the next question to ask yourself, is this coming from clarity or panic? Am I going, oh, I recognize this. This is gaslighting and I'm going to withdraw? Or does it say, oh my gosh, I don't even know which way is up right now. And you have to stop. Then that's more panic, right? Am I trying to protect myself or control an outcome is another good question to ask yourself. Am I looking at what I have control of and taking action on what I can do to create my own safety? Or am I trying to control the outcome to get the other person to do something different? So if you're activated, pause, take a deep breath, regulate, and then revisit the boundary. Those questions that I asked in the last episode around when your body's activated, when you're triggering, would be really good to review with that. Boundaries set from regulation feel different. They land different and they don't require force. So practice setting boundaries from a regulated state. So here's a simple framework for you to think about. Name the behavior. If there's manipulation happening, you say, oh, that's manipulative. I am unwilling to stay in a manipulative conversation. I will withdraw. So you name the behavior, you name your limit, and you name your response, what you're going to choose to do. Here's another example. If your spouse is unwilling to provide transparency and they are acting secretive around their phone or their devices, you can say, when there's secrecy around your phone, I feel unsafe. I'm not willing to stay in a relationship where transparency isn't present. If this continues, I'm going to need to step back from the relationship while I decide what my next steps are. Notice there was no yelling, there's no convincing, no chasing, just truth. This makes me uncomfortable. I'm not willing to stay in it. And this is what I'm going to do next. So when I say it that way, it brings in that Bill of Rights. I have a right to not be in uncomfortable situations. I have a right to transparency and honesty in my relationship. I have a right to my emotions. I have a right to express my needs. I have a right. So that example is bringing in everything we've talked about earlier with my values and my rights and boundaries all together. So if you take nothing else from this episode, remember that setting a boundary does not make you controlling. It gives you self-respect. And remember that boundaries aren't for punishments. They're always your pathway to safety. So if you're doing boundaries in a healthy way, and they're true boundaries where you're stepping into an empowered place and you're not trying to control an outcome, and someone else calls your boundary a threat, it's often because in the past they have benefited from your lack of boundaries. And so they're uncomfortable with your new clarity now. But I'm going to remind you that you're allowed to choose for yourself. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to change rules when the rules that you've followed previously have harmed you. And that can help you be rooted in your truth and help you rise in your power. So I hope that this has been helpful for you. If this has, please share it with someone else who's in this work that could benefit from it. Check the show notes for more ways to connect with me, and I hope you'll be back here next week. Okay, ladies, this message is just for you. I want to share 2 upcoming in-person healing experiences I'm really excited about that are created specifically for betrayed partners who are looking for deeper support, clarity, and connection. The first one is the Courage to Thrive Betrayal Trauma Intensive happening March 17th through the 20th in Spanish Fork, Utah. This is a structured, immersive intensive designed to help you understand betrayal trauma, what's happening in your body, regulate your nervous system, and begin rebuilding your sense of safety, strength, and self-trust. I'll be there helping to facilitate this experience, and I would truly love the chance to meet you and support you in person. The second is the first ever Rise, Renew, Restore retreat in Costa Rica. It's taking place July 13th through the 18th. And this one is a more spacious, restorative retreat for betrayed partners who are ready to just slow down, reconnect with their bodies, and heal in a deeply nurturing environment surrounded by nature and trauma-informed care. I'm so excited to also be helping to facilitate this retreat and would love to connect with you there. Both of these experiences are led by myself and some of my favorite colleagues who deeply understand betrayal trauma, and just to remind you that you don't have to walk this journey alone. You can find all the details and the registration links in the show notes, and I really hope to see you in person at one of these events. Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination, it's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.